A great Sakipandita said that one must never stop learning, even if one is certain to die tomorrow.
伟大的萨迦班智达曾经说，即使一个人第二天就要死亡了，还是不应该停止学习。
So, I come from a culture and a tradition that really cherishes the life of learning.
我来自一个传统呢，非常重视这个学习的文化。
So I'm so honored and thrilled to be in one of the most important learning centers in America.
所以仁波切说，他非常荣幸来到北美洲最重要的学府之一。
I often joke with many of my other non-American friends that America is never going to stop being superpower for next 200 years just because of great university like Berkeley.
仁波切常常跟他的其他的非美国人的朋友开玩笑说，美国绝对不会变成不是超级强国，在未来可见的200年之内，就是因为有像伯克莱这种非常好的大学。
And I have to thank all the faculties and the department here for making this happen.
仁波切要谢谢所有的这个老师跟这里的学术部门，让今天这个场所的讨论可以发生。
So this is a very big subject, and we don't have much time. I'd like to point out that whatever I'm saying, I'm not addressing this to scientists. I will give you my reasons, few of my reasons why I have no sort of no intention to talk with the scientist, and I also believe that at the moment there is no mutual ground where scientists and Buddhists can talk. But there is effort here and there dedicated for dialogue between Buddhists and scientists, and I rejoice. If something Buddha said took Einstein 2,500 years later to say the exactly same thing what Buddha said, I think scientists will end up saying the same thing. This, as a Buddhist, I will say this. So I'm actually addressing this to people who think they are Buddhist, but they may have not, because they are sort of excited by some quotes like Einstein said, in the future Buddhism will be compatible with science. They get excited by things like this. And of course, science has a lot of authority, especially in this day and age. So I can understand why there are people who think they are Buddhist, but they have not really given up, or not given up is maybe not the right word, but they are basically materialist. Also, maybe Buddhist who thinks they are Buddhist, but they are actually, by consequences, they are none other than Charvaka. There's a school in the past in India called Charvaka, which does not believe in cause, condition, to the certain extent, therefore no reincarnation. There are also Buddhists who think they are Buddhist, but they may have not yet giving up entirely some of the Abrahamic residue. And to this, maybe we can have some sort of at least an opening of a dialogue. Even though I made some note, it's not going to be very orderly, so it's going to be chaotic. And I have to also warn you, unlike many of our other teachings, this is going to be a little dry and intellectual. You know, some people get excited, I think, when you look at a system that rejects Creator God. They also get excited by looking at, to a certain extent, understanding a little bit about Buddhist concept of cause, condition, and effect. I'm talking about this Buddhist that I'm addressing to. Okay, those who got excited about, oh, they don't believe in God. Oh, they believe in cause and condition. Sort of a cause to get excited. And then also, there are a few other things like meditation. It's always good. You know, meditation is always nothing really drastically can go wrong if you talk about just some meditation. And then, of course, non-violence, of course, you can sell this easily. But this alone is not going to make a complete path of the Buddha Dharma. Forget not believing in God, believing in cause, condition, and effect. Even understanding of emptiness, not necessarily complete the Buddhist path. One of the most important elements of Buddhism is, in Tibetan we call it sungjuk. I think loosely you can say union. Understanding of sort of the philosophy or the reality of union. I'm not talking about a tantric sect. I'm talking about the union of wisdom and method, union of relative truth and ultimate truth, union of emptiness and clarity, union of samsara and nirvana. In order to really appreciate Buddha Dharma in its depth, you have to understand this a little bit. And I will explain this later. This is one of the reasons cannot really have a dialogue with a materialist. Because the concept of union, I don't think exists with a materialist, especially union of matter and mind. Okay, as I said, I'm going to, the order is all, everywhere. Another reason why can't really have a dialogue with the materialist is the way Buddhists validate things. To validate something as true or not true. The Buddhists have several ways to validate. Validating the truth through what we call ngunsum tsema. It's like a direct cognition, inferential logic, and analogy, and words of the Buddha. Now, of course, the words of the Buddha is useless for talking with a materialist. Totally understandable. Although, I have to say this right now before I forget. There are ontologists like Richard Dixie who believes that something exists before the knower. I don't know, like 1 billion years ago, so on and so forth. Something exists before a knower. And no matter how much I hear, how much I listen, all I hear is an assumption. And so, therefore, it is a statement of a scientist. You know, I'm talking about Lung Tsema. So, for me, might as well trust words of the Buddha than a word of a scientist, since both of them are assumption anyway. And I would prefer the Buddha's assumption.
So, do
Words of the Buddha, yes. I will not bring. Analogy also useless, I think. Inferential logic, to the certain extent, maybe we can discuss. Now, direct cognition, there are few things that we can discuss, like actual direct cognition using your senses, like eyes, ears, etc. But the Buddhists talk about direct cognition of Nanjur Ngonsum, is called yogi's direct cognition. And this is something that we cannot talk with the scientists, no ground. Especially if you talk about Tantric Buddhism, they talk about a wisdom that is not mind, then gets even more complicated. For this reason, you know, there has been all this experiment of monks, you know, wearing all this stuff that they put on their head, and then, oh, the meditators are different, whatever. What do you call this? Sort of, yeah, all that experiment. People like Mr. Tinle Norbu and Mr. Sangye Dorje will laugh at this. Because anything that is detectable, these people don't trust. Another thing, this is of course subject to discussion. Scientists don't seem to have mind. I'm not talking about, you know, sort of literally, I'm talking about, they don't seem to have a concept of mind that Buddhists talk about. So there's no mutual ground. Mind's definition, what is mind, identity of the mind, these are not mutually agreed upon with the scientists. I don't know, I'm also learning. I really want this to be sort of the beginning of a dialogue, a little bit of thinking. So there's this question, what is it? Is there Buddhism without reincarnation? Thank you for bringing up this. It's a very important question. It's so important to discuss. It's a very difficult and tricky question. Many reasons. One is language. Reincarnation in English, I looked up at the dictionary, and it says rebirth of a soul in a new body. Then, immediately, I had to ask, what's the definition of soul? Again in the dictionary. Spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or an animal regarded as immortal. With this definition, we have a problem. But you know, English language, I find, is very rich. The other definition of reincarnation is new version of something of the past. Kind of nice, that one. That resonates, the Tibetan word yang si. Also, the soul, another definition of the soul is essence or embodiment of a specified quality. Not bad for me. Of course, you know, the words, even though it is defined in the dictionary, most authoritative dictionary, doesn't mean much because different people will use with a different background of habit and culture and tradition. So it's worthwhile to really sit down and talk about these definitions. This is where I always think Western academic world really will really protect Buddha Dharma in the future. For instance, Charvaka, this school in India who does not believe in past life, future life, all that, sadly, whole discussion between the Charvaka and the other school, very few is found. Because in India, culturally, anyone who does not believe in reincarnation are bad. So there is not many liturgy. The great scholar, Indian scholar, present scholar, Amartya Sen said that Charvaka actually probably may have done so much contribution to the Indian system of thinking. And I agree this. Like when we study Buddhist philosophy, pages after pages, argument between Chittamata school and the Madhyamika school. Half a page, dialogue between Charvaka and the Buddhists. Very sad. Culture have somehow, as much as it has contributed to a system like Buddha Dharma, it has also distorted Buddha Dharma in many different ways. I believe that some of the modern Buddhists having a hard time understanding the reincarnation has got a lot to do with this Tibetan system of tulku, like me. You understand? And tulku system, yes, is one of the culprit, sort of distorting the idea of reincarnation. It didn't help. Going back to union, to unite wisdom and method, relative truth and ultimate truth, absolutely important for the Buddhist path. And we will talk about the sort of the idea of true truth a little bit later if we have time. Okay, to use the, sort of more commonly found language. Emptiness, the wisdom, and burning an incense, uniting this, absolutely important. This is why you will find masters teach about Hat Sutra in the morning, where forget reincarnation, even enlightenment does not exist. What is reincarnation? It's nothing. Even enlightenment does not exist. But in the afternoon, you will find this master diligently, meticulously, very fussy with the incense, the lamp, reincarnation, so on and so forth. This is another way the Buddhist approach. A little different from materialist, I would say. So what I'm saying is, in order to talk about reincarnation and karma, you have no choice, but you have to talk about emptiness, shunyata. If you separate these two, you cannot talk. This is difficult. Even to have a glimpse of understanding, forget realization, understanding of shunyata is difficult. Because the moment we talk about emptiness, we slip in thinking we are talking about non-existence. It's really difficult to think in terms of, okay, when we talk about shunyata, it's difficult to think in terms of, he's also talking about non-existence of non-existence. This is difficult. And you will find in most of the Indian philosophy, and especially Buddhists, every time we study, non-existence of something easier. But when we talk about non-existence of a non-existence, it's always difficult to understand and study. In relation to this, body and mind. First of all, the definition of the body and the mind between materialist and the Buddhists, I think, are different. This is important now. I know there's so many things that are quite important. I don't know which one we should be discussing first. If you read sutras or shastras, at glance you will feel that the Buddha talks about mind and the body as a separate entity, mainly. But in many Buddha's teachings, sutras, distinctions between these two is almost non-existent. Body and mind, not separate, or not same also. Now, this brings an issue. There are Buddhists who say, oh, all those Buddhists, all the sutras that you are talking, they are not real sutras. They are not taught by the Buddha. What are you talking about? This is what they would say. We can have another discussion about this another time. But here, for today, what is necessary to analyze whether there is Buddhism without reincarnation, I need to present the idea of direct teaching and the expedient meaning teaching. I don't know, I could be wrong, please correct. Apart from maybe Indian way of talking and Buddhist especially, I find that most of the Western or modern presentation on science or technology or politics, it's usually a direct ngedon teachings, isn't it? It's a ngedon, it's a direct teaching. You have to take literally. Buddha's teaching is not that easy to sort of put it in a black and white like this. To put it very crude, all Buddha's teaching, almost many Buddha's teachings are half true and half not true. Crudely speaking, he's kind of half lying and half not lying. And you will ask why? Because, and this we declare proudly in Tibetan, we call it Chemba Jumtsindu Chene Chwe Mishe. Buddha never taught anything because he wanted to exhibit his knowledge. All Buddha's teaching is because of his compassion. If a Buddha look at a Californian who is suffering with a low self-esteem, he will say, yeah, you are a very good man. You are the center of the world, all of this. He could say this. But he also knows very well that this method is going to, in 30 years, turn whole California into a state of narcissist. And this system of Dangdan and Ngedon, we call it, delivering the truth directly and delivering the truth indirectly. This exists with the Buddha's teaching all the time. And I will single out those Buddhists who say, all the earlier sutras that they say that, oh, your sutra does not exist. Those are not necessarily Buddha's word. I will have to say they have to think twice. Because in their own sutras, Buddha at times praised generosity so much. But in their own sutra, some other sutra, Buddha is very cynical about generosity because he wants to sell the discipline. He wants to sell patience, other good things. So he said, don't get distracted with the generosity, so on and so forth. This is another reason why again, a Buddhist can talk about emptiness wholeheartedly and the ritual does not contradict. I have to thank Professor Shaft here because 2 times we had dinner and he talked about ritual in Buddhism and how this is, people talk about sort of Buddhism without the religiosity. And this really made me think, these Buddhists, what the hell, British Buddhist. The tendency, what they do is they cherry pick. Oh, meditation, wow, that's good, let's pick this up. Fire puja, that's a Tibetan stuff. Not good, because you are underestimating relative truth. maybe I'm being very narrow-minded. Looks like many of the other religion, including Abrahamic religion, seems to need to adjust to the present day of thinking and present day values. But I will have to say, Buddhism, ground, path, method, nothing needs to be modified, nothing. There is a path for everyone. That does not mean that others' method is invalid. So hot, let's take a break. 10
太热
minutes.
了，我们休息一下。